Hello everyone, I'm with Lee Gilboa today. She's a composer, engineer, and researcher. Thanks for taking the time out to have this conversation, Lee. I'm looking forward to it.
Likewise.
You were in Berlin recently. How was your trip?
Thanks, and thanks for having me also. My trip was great. I went on a residency with Space Lab. It's an organization over there that is really dedicated to study of space and sound and aesthetics. And they have 2 studios. I was working in one of them, developing some new materials for an album project that I have coming up. And it was a really, really good experience. I didn't realize how much I needed that, like time away and just being in a studio for an unlimited amount of time, pretty much. Yeah, so that was pretty good.
Cool.
Yeah. Do you need this back?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have to take it back. So I had to look you up for this interview, and I was surprised to find that you had this extensive jazz background before you embarked on your electronic music adventures. So what was your jazz background like?
Wow. Well, I started playing clarinet when I was 11, I think. And then saxophone and piano, and I got really into jazz very, very early on. I was playing in a big band for like 6 years, all through middle school and high school. And when I got here, I knew I wanted to do jazz comp as a major. I was a student here before. And I did that. I did complete a degree in jazz composition. But I also realized I don't like being on stage at all. Which, I mean, we can talk about it later because it's more related to my electronic practice nowadays. But yeah, the jazz background was a very big part of who I am as a musician. I think it still is. I mean, it's the music I listen to the most. We ran into each other in a Aaron Parks concert a few months back, which I saw again in Berlin, by the way.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was just as good as it was in February. But yeah, jazz is always a big part of the picture for me.
Nice. What kinds of players or composers or like what era of jazz were you into growing up?
Post-bop was definitely my go-to. Giant Sonny Rollins fan. Wayne Shorter, I'm a sax player, so obviously I have to name all of them. Hank Mobley.
Oh, yeah.
And then more contemporary stuff too. I'm also a huge Joshua Redman fan. Aaron Parks has always been someone I listen to regularly. Brad Meldau had a huge impact on me, especially like his earlier stuff. I think that would be my big ones. Yeah, Sonny Rollins, Brad Meldau.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, for once I can recognize and I can claim to have heard all the jazz artists someone named, so that's awesome. So
basic like that.
Well, me too, right? So I guess you discovered electronic music at Berkeley through your courses and studies. What was that experience like, and do you have any early memories of discovering this new genre?
Yeah, absolutely. My first exposure, I guess there were others, but like nothing that caught my attention very much. But James Blake was the first one to really catch my attention. I've never learned to share. And actually today it's one of the first songs I teach in my electronic composition class here, just because it was such a shock for me. The expressivity of it, the flexibility, how much material he could stretch out of his one vocal line on there, and so many beautiful harmonies and sound design technique. Giant beat in the end. I've never heard anything like that, and I felt like I had to understand how to do that. And I mean, it did coincide with like a personal crisis for me when I understood that like pursuing jazz as a career was not really something I wanted. Like I wanted it naively as a kid, but I didn't understand what that would mean until I got here, and then I saw how much more committed people were to performing, to being on stage, and to being in a band. So I had to kind of find a new language within music, and I applied to EPD. And the rest is kind of history. I was a terrible EPD student, I think, because I didn't know much of anything. And I didn't really do dance music. I felt like I had no rhythm because all I could think about was like jazz rhythms and stuff like that. And then EDM, I was like, oh, how do you do that? Like what, how does this work? So it was learning the new sound and learning the new culture and learning everything. It took me a long time to find my way within electronic music, I think. Only towards the end of my time here, I started understanding what I want to do. I lost your question, I think, probably, right?
Just what attracted you to electronic music?
But yeah, I think, it was definitely James Blake and seeing how much you can do with so little, which I guess still remains now that I think about what I do and the kind of work I make. I mean, the project I'm working on now, the album project, is another one of those moments of trying to refine my own language, which is the most exciting part of being a composer, but also the most stressful and terrifying moment. Like, can I do something else than what I always do? And what does it mean at this point of my career to kind of rethink what I do and approach things in a different way? But I kind of went back to this idea of doing a lot with very little, and I'm working with single sentences right now, which is very rare for me. It's a very sound design-y oriented project, so I guess it really is kind of a full circle moment that I didn't think about until this very second. But do you want this?
Sure. So it's hard for me to really place your style of music in a certain genre, but roughly speaking, I think it's closer to, say, electroacoustic music or acousmatic music than it is to EDM. So what kinds of do you remember any early quote unquote works instead of like tracks and like all these EDM kind of things? Do you remember any other early works or composers whose electronic music inspired you?
Oh, you mean like not in the popular music genre? But, I mean, yeah, Phil Niblock was a big influence on me. Alvin Lucier, and I could name others, but I think because of how my trajectory was so unusual in a sense, coming from like jazz and then trying to understand electronic music through EDM and figuring out that I cannot do that, but being really attracted to this kind of music and to production as a whole, I can't really separate that. Like for me, Arca is just as important to the kind of work I do and to the kind of language I speak, even though we share probably nothing aesthetically. But conceptually and like the way it sounds, I mean, I'm so committed to popular music and this part of my education that Trevor Wishart and Arca like hold the same place for me in terms of the tradition that I was trying to get into. Yeah.
Cool. You just mentioned you teach an electronic music course. Is it the same one as Intro to Electronic Music?
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you introduce electronic music to all these Berkeley majors who, in some ways, they probably have more exposure to electronic music than you did when you entered EPD. So how do you, what's your approach like?
It's a very interesting class for me because, I mean, so we have two electronic composition courses in the department. There is the electroacoustic composition class, and then there is the Intro to Comp, which is my area. And I look at it more as a, I mean, okay, first of all, I don't require genres from it. The only requirement is that they do a project in an area they're comfortable in and that they try something new, and they can choose at which point of the semester they do each one of these. So it's a midterm and final kind of thing. And my approach to it, I mean, we do a lot of listening and analysis in class, mainly popular music, to be honest, although I do bring in some more weird things, let's say. But I try to ground it outside of this tradition, I think probably because of I mean, yeah, it's probably related to my own tendencies and how I can see my work in conversation with people from both ends of the spectrum. So I try to think of it as, what do we need fundamentally in order to make a piece of music? You need to have a sense of form, either sections or a through composed idea. You need to understand the relationship between time and measures and time and beats, and what is the difference between 8 measures and 32 seconds. How do you occupy a space for 32 seconds as opposed to 8 measures and things like that. So that's the first thing we tackle in the semester. Then the other units that we have are rhythm and repetition and variation. So we think about a groove and how to think rhythm. Where does rhythm belong? Is it only the drum kit, or can we expand this idea to other areas of the music? And then repetition, of course, you have to think about it, especially in the DAW. It's so easy to just command D, command D, command D, command D, and duplicate things. But sometimes you need that. Sometimes you better work with some variation to make sure that things go a little bit differently. And then we think about tone, which to me means, it could be the sound design and the instrumentation of a piece. It could also be the lyrics of a piece and the mix and the message that it's trying to convey, and space, because I cannot have a conversation without thinking about space, apparently. So we do that in the end. And then in the middle, I do talk to them about writer's block, which is important to me personally, that we just put it on the table, that it happens, and that it's okay that it happens. And we have a week about conceptual frameworks and listening and society type thing that we talk about. So I try to really detach it from any... I try not to lean on a genre for too long with them, but think of music as a whole, and just what it needs in order to work, and why, the electronic word doesn't really make that much of a difference, except it does. So we just need to understand how to feel more comfortable in that space, I think, and that's my goal with this class. And they do amazing stuff. Everyone is doing completely different things usually. Yeah, I had some. I'm very excited whenever they release their music and I recognize it from the class. And I actually had, in the last 2 years, I think there were 3 or maybe 4 releases that are like, oh wait, I remember that as an early draft. Yeah. That's awesome.
That's good.
Yeah.
So with your jazz background, I'm sure you had this process of, say, transcribing lines, and you learn things about chord tones, harmony, melody, pitch, so on and so forth, right? Motivic development. Given the style of music you're currently engaged with, did you find yourself reinterpreting those musical elements but applying them to this new idiom?
Entirely. Transcription is still something I teach also. A little different. It's not like notes on a page anymore, but they do a groove sound alike, for example, or a tone sound alike, just to imitate the production style. And I do that too. Whenever I try to learn something new, I go through process of listening and analyzing what's going on, production analysis almost, regardless of the genre. And then motivic development and rhythmic thinking and voicing, these are all things that came back to my work more recently. I think I went from one end to the extreme, and I resisted all pitch and all rhythm and all, except for form, I guess. I didn't really pay attention to anything during my master's, I think, or in the period where I was doing more sound arty stuff. And then when I came back to music, I felt like I had enough of that, and I came back to music. It took me a minute to find a way to reintroduce this. It was actually through a collaboration I did with Samus. She's a rapper based in Providence. Amazing rapper. And we did a project together, and she wrote verses, and I had to set them up with a lot of other voices that I recorded for this piece. But that suddenly kind of got me going, her a cappella verses and her inner time that she kept with it. I felt like I had to be more responsive to that, and that introduced so much new, old ideas for me, and I had to revisit how I go about rhythm and how I go about working with a melody. I think cadence was always important to me, even when it was speech-based entirely, and there was no other legible sound in the work. How sentences fall and the repetition of a sentence and the motivic development and all of that was like it had room. I think today I'm more conscious of it, also in terms of like the sound design work I do around it and composing more abstract ideas that are musical and don't have a semantic meaning to them, but they do have a musical meaning that they pretty clearly convey. Yeah.
I think any kind of musician who's involved themselves in multiple genres, they can pretty quickly realize that some of these concepts don't belong to one domain, like the idea of cadence.
Yeah.
That sounds like such a classical music thing. Oh, perfect, authentic cadence or whatever. But then you can definitely reimagine it, and it's like satisfying to try and reinterpret it in your own idiom.
Yeah.
Did you have any classical music education?
A little bit. I mean, I studied the basic rules, and I did study piano for a few years, so there I played like Diabelli and Bach and all of that stuff. But and also on clarinet, I did go through 2 years of very rigorous classical training, but it was too rigorous. I was like, thank you. Let me go learn choro etudes instead, and that requires just as much technique as any other. And I felt way more connected to that. So,
what about like composition oriented?
No, composition. My first composing teacher was John Bostock, back in the day, and he came from jazz, and we worked on standard style compositions like 32 bars, AABA, and then a little bit longer and a little bit longer and a little bit longer. But no, I'm mainly composition-wise. I studied jazz, and then, well, my PhD. I mean, my PhD advisor is Eric Nathan, who is a classical composer, fully, amazing composer, and one of the best teachers I've ever had. Just because, and that also shaped how I teach. I think studying with him and seeing that it's possible for two people that speak completely different musical languages to have productive composition lessons. That really helped me. As a composer, it really helped me, I think, but also just to feel more comfortable in my own skin and to call what I do compositions. The fact that I could talk to him about it and he would bring his wording, like orchestration, timbre, and that, and I was like, oh, the stereo field, or I'll put a low pass filter on that. That would help with the timbre, probably. So that was really a positive experience, and the closest I had to a classical training, I think, would be my time with Eric.
Cool. I always thought that. Well, I didn't always think this, but I eventually realized that orchestrating music for a full orchestra, let's say, and just sound designing things, it's a very similar concept, but sometimes people probably don't see it because they look at the superficial aspect of it. Oh, this is EDM, and oh, this is concert hall music, so maybe they don't make that connection, but you gotta think of it in the same way almost. I mean, I like thinking. I'm looking at those speakers that we have, and I love that it's called a stereo field, and not just two speakers, because we have all of this room that we need to work with, which kind of resembles a stage, in a sense. And you need to think of what do you do with all of this width, and what do you fill it with, and how do you make it feel cohesive, in a sense. And you can do amazing things with 3 sounds. And you can do amazing things with 1,700 sounds. I don't know how many sounds people use nowadays in a DAW session, but you gotta treat it the same way. You gotta give it room to breathe. That's why I try to detach genre when I think about teaching those things, because making a space feel full works the same way. Supporting a vocalist works the same way. Supporting a lead line, if it's a synth, if it's a guitar, if it's
any other instrument that you can think about, it works the same way. And you need to have those pads. You need to have those supportive instruments around it to give stuff room to breathe and a bed to fall back on. Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly mixing yet. Like, I think it's fully composition when you think about it then. But, you know, with us, people that work in a DAW, like, there is some mix work involved in this process always, because part of how you design a sound is thinking about its volume and thinking about where it sits in the stereo field. So it's always a little bit of both, but I think it's, yeah, I lost my train of thought for a moment, but.
It's all good. You work a lot with voice in your own work. What is that experience like? Because when I heard some of your music, I'll be honest and say that I hadn't heard too much solo voice. It's not fair to call your work solo voice, but like, let's say voice and electronics and just that kind of fixed media piece. I hadn't heard too much of those. But when I heard them, it felt like I was listening to an audiobook on steroids or something. It was just such a crazy experience. How did you get into dealing with voice, especially considering your earlier jazz experience, which sounds mostly instrumental? Certainly all the influences you listed, they were all instrumentalists. So how did you get into like voice stuff?
I'll answer that, but just because you said it feels like listening to audiobook on steroids, I'll share a funny anecdote that my first album was rejected from Spotify because they said it's a podcast.
Oh, no. That's crazy.
But yeah, no, so I haven't tried to release on Spotify ever since. Don't regret this particularly. But yeah, it just reminded me, so I guess thank you. But yeah, an audiobook on steroids is about right. How did I start working with voices? I don't even remember anymore. It's been years that I've been doing this. I have a giant sample library with like all the voices I've ever recorded at home. But there was something about it that was very satisfying. I think one of the earlier pieces I did was called Redacted. I released it in 2021 with like a collection of older pieces that I was working through at the time, like reworking them. And that one actually had a lot of other sounds in it too. I think I was a little scared of just doing bare voice stuff. I didn't know how that would work. So there was a lot of other material in there. I don't really remember how I made it, but it was all there. And I think then, I mean, by the time I was at Columbia, I got my master's there, and I was already interested in working with speech. I felt like I finally got comfortable in my own skin in that sense. I wanted to continue developing that muscle. And I spent the next 2 years heavily working with that and using my voice, which was a very strange experience for me, because I'm not a vocalist. So I wasn't used to hearing myself recorded. And it also took me a long time to be okay with like letting go. And there is one piece of mine, it's called Inner Head. And it's a pretty personal one. And I think the reason it works, I mean, people seem to respond well to it, is because I had to go through this process of treating myself as a subject, like treating the material that I recorded of myself speaking, like someone interviewed me, and that was the material. And I had to treat it like I would treat any other person, and not to protect myself, but to be like, oh, this is gold. Let's take that very awkward personal thing I just said. Let's bring it in there. I had to forget that it was me in the pieces, and I think that helped a lot, because then I got more comfortable doing that, and I just kept on going and did more and more pieces. There were more and more questions that started interesting me. It started to interest me, like issues of collectivity and shared experiences versus personal narratives. That was something I was working with a lot. And my master's thesis as a whole was about sonic portraiture and what does it mean. I love photography. And obviously photography and audio recording, I saw a correlation there. So I was thinking through what does it mean to create a portrait of someone with sound. Like not to rely so much on the visual aspect of it, but how do we portray a person sonically? So as a whole, that's what my thesis was about. There were a few pieces that were more directly responding to that concept, but I think it started with like dyslexia, which was about my own dyslexia. Then there was another one called Woman, and then there was another one called Peter Pan, and another one. Yeah, wow, I did a bunch of pieces during that time. That's what happens when you get an MFA. They really want you to make a ton of pieces at every given moment.
You mentioned your piece Inner Head, and you also had a piece at the ICMC, which is the reason I kind of reached out to you for an interview. I didn't remember the name of the piece.
The ICMC.
Yeah.
The Right Not to Be.
The Right Not to Be, right. So in both of these pieces, I think whoever the subject is, whether it's you or whether it's a collection of people, I think they're allowed to be very vulnerable, and they're allowed to explore issues of identity and all these kinds of concepts. And it's a very different feeling because on the one hand, you can say, try to express these things through instrumental music, through harmony. You know, if you play a minor chord, it's sad, right? Or if it could even be a singer-songwriter thing where, you know, they have these words and rhymes and things like this, and they are suggestive of all these emotions. But when you have spoken word type things, it's a very different kind of engagement, and it's even more vulnerable than, say, a singer-songwriter singing about their heartbreak or something like this, because this is more like unfiltered, more I think I just want to use the word vulnerable. So how do you explore this? And like I'm sure it's difficult in some ways to put anything like that out there, because it's it's not, you don't have to analyze it, you can really feel it. It's like really talking to a person or listening to someone talk. So I'm curious about how you approach this.
It's interesting that you're bringing up these two because they're very different in my mind. So Inner Head is a kind of a solo piece, but let me start with the other one, with The Right Not to Be. So that one it's the latest one that I've made, and it features breaking the silence. And I was interested in thinking through identity with them. I don't know how much you know about them. They're an organization from Israel, like an anti-occupation organization made of Israeli veterans that served in the military, and nowadays recognize what they have done as crimes instead of like dutiful service. So they testify against the state. And I didn't want to talk to them about that as much because they have so much material that they're already doing, but my collaboration with them was more focused on questions of collective identity and what do we do when we are at odds with our collective identity? Or what are the stakes when your opinions and your political morality is not in line with the status quo of the state you come from? And how do we negate that? So it was a very vulnerable conversation. It was a very interesting collaboration process for me because I had a contact person in the organization that found people that wanted to do this, but they were shocked. Like I showed up in their offices with a microphone. I'm just gonna record you. I'll ask you some questions and I'll make a piece of music out of this in the end. They're like, but how? We're not singing. Like, yeah, I know. Don't worry. Leave that part to me. But I think the way I start, so I listen to all the interviews before I start editing, and that's my process for any interview piece that I do. And I choose my center point, like the person based on whom I'm going to, like the person who I make the first cut from, is usually dictating the tone of everything else, because I already start building a collection of sentences that interests me. And in that piece, it was that woman that opens the composition. I knew as soon as I heard her say that, I was like, yeah, that's my opening line. Because she started to, I asked her about what's the story she grew up on in relation to Israel. And she said it was a beautiful story, but it was just a story about how the Jewish people were on this land and made it from nothing and made it great and blah, blah, blah. And then you can hear me like from the back of the room, like, is it a myth or is it real? And she says it's a myth. And that's the sentence that started that piece. So I edited everyone else based on that and created this. I think, like, I don't know, I gathered like 1,000 samples out of out of those materials. And I cut them in different lengths also. Like I have a categorization system by now. So I have sentences, and then I have questions, and then I have one shots, which is like one word. I have a whole folder of ums and ems that people say, the noises before someone starts speaking, breaths, laughter, sound effects, which is like when sometimes when people say the word what, and they linger a little bit, the whoa is really fun. So I just cut that tiny bit. And so this is kind of what I think of as sound effects. But it became like a way of listening. It's very specifically to speaking voices. And then in that piece, it was another one of those, I mean, I'm super grateful I had the chance. I was working on it at Electron Music Studio, in Stockholm. I got a residency to go there, and it was such a productive time just to sit in a room with the multi-channel system in place already and to start composing it with that in mind. Like knowing that this is how I want it to be heard and having access to the system. It was one of the first time I've had full access from day one. And it was such a good process for me. And it gave me a lot of room both to process all of this material, because I'm Israeli. So to kind of sit with that and to think through what they said and to be really thoughtful about that, like you kind of have to develop some level of care towards the people and how you represent them. So I had to take my time doing that, but then also just being in that creative space, it opened up something for me and allowed me to be a little bit more bold somehow in how I navigate this, but how are you going to make music out of this question. So I think it was one of the more musical ones that I've made up to that point. And with Innerhead, I mean, it was similar in a sense. I mean, it's very different because it was just one voice. And then, I mean, I did record, I was working with the poem by Cavafy for that one, The Walls. So for that one, I did have some people, I had people come in and record just the recitation of the poem so that I can build like a Greek chorus out of it. But the process for that one was also like this very same thing, like choosing my focal point, like what's the sentence that I'm kind of working through here, where do I start? Since it was me, it was harder because I wanted to protect myself a little bit and not to be as vulnerable. But that goes back to this idea of care, like just like I needed to teach myself to trust myself, that I can be protective over myself just as I am over any other person I record for my work.
Cool. I think now that we had this conversation and you shared all this with me, there's one piece I can think of where someone's voice really very drastically changed the emotional experience of the piece. So actually, Spencer introduced me to it. It was a piece by Bob Ostertag. I don't remember the name of the piece, sadly. I think it started with an S. But it was this sample of a boy crying because his father had just passed away because of some kind of warfare. And that kept looping in the background. And it had this very interesting effect. So yeah, it really gives people a new way to interpret voice in music, because when you think of voice, they think of melodies and things like this, but this is I think it's different and not something conventional, but yet it's something that people can really relate with pretty easily, because it's just words. We like you could make a piece out of this conversation, and people would understand what the words are. So I think it's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, that is always something that I'm battling a little bit, like this fight between what a piece is trying to say and what the language is saying, let's say. Because we work with material that people know, right? Language, people understand it. And also the voice has, speaking voices have a melody of their own. Like there is a reason why we know to recognize that something is a question as opposed to when something is a sentence. When someone loses their train of thought, we understand that. When someone, you see what's going on with me right now. But there is like there is a melody to all of this, to the way we speak, to the way we talk, and to the pacing, and to how we work with pitch, speaking pitch, and working on with that as a source material, especially when it comes to repetition. Like repetition takes on a lot of space for me in my head when I compose, because I know this. I know that I'm going to play the same sentence again and again and again. Right. So there has to be a reason for it, or not. It could just be like the way that it sounds that I like, and that's why I repeat it. Or like there is a reason for the repetition. So it's always something I'm trying to find a balance between, like repeating meaning semantically or repeating a musical idea, and how do I make that clear, this distinction compositionally. And I have my tricks, but it's something I'm always learning how to do, I feel.
Very cool. I know you work a lot in multi-channel idioms, and you also teach a course on multi-channel stuff. When did you get into this, and why are you drawn to it?
When did I get into this? I think it was towards the end of my time here as a student. Actually, that's exactly what it was. I was the first student to work in B54.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
It was a completely different system than it is now, except the speakers are the same. But yeah, that was my first multi-channel piece. Was there.
Nice.
And what drew me to it, I think, was learning to mix surround, like sound for film stuff.
Right.
And I thought that was so cool. The panner moves around. What? I had to do more of this. Nowadays, I'm less interested in surround. Like, I still think it's really cool. But I like the compositional side of things a little bit more, obviously. And yeah, I guess in terms of how I got into it, that's how I got in. Why I remained, it's a whole other question. And I just I guess at some point you kind of get greedy. Like after you work with 8 speakers, 2 doesn't feel like enough room anymore. Sometimes, even though I love stereo. And I always make sure to have a good stereo mix of everything I do. Just because I think it's super important. And also it's how we consume most of our music, realistically. But I became really committed to that, I guess, out of that greed. It was selfish. It was fully selfish in the beginning. It was just like, this was really fun and I want to do more of that. And then I just couldn't stop. And it became a part of my practice. Even when I work on stereo compositions, I work in the same format that I would for multi-channel, which is kind of like redundant, I guess. But I can't not think about it when I work, about all of the stuff that it opened up to me, like layerings and, width it gave me a whole new perception for width and front and back. And now I also, I mean, in 2018, I met Daniel Neumann, dear friend and colleague, and we've been working together since 2019, I believe. Nowadays, it's known as New Year Spatial, but it was known as City Swamp for many, many years. It's a concert series that he ran, and then he brought me on as a production assistant, and eventually I became a curator for this series. And that has also become a very important part of my life. Just being exposed and to a lot of multi-channel music, and offering a space for people to explore multi-channel work. So working with Daniel has definitely been a motivation for me to stay and to I found in him someone who is also so committed to this, and has such deep knowledge of audio specialization. I'm so grateful to him, and to the friendship that has evolved between us since then. But I think meeting him really impacted why I remained active in that.
One interesting thing about multi-channel music, or even just any kind of multi-channel media, is that you often don't find too many spaces where you can accommodate this kind of thing. Certainly at Berkeley you could, and many other academic institutions you could. Until you mentioned film, I kind of forgot that film was inherently multi-channel, and all these experiences we have at the cinema they are multi-channel. But what are your thoughts on this? Because I remember one of my composition professors once told me, humans respond to different aspects of sound with different sensitivity. So pitch is certainly one of them, and amplitude is another. But if you really want to make heads turn, I don't know if the pun is intended, like spatializing is the real kind of way to do it. And it's so underexploited in most musical settings. Like if you go to let's say a concert, the performers will invariably be in front of you, and even like the spatializing or like the orchestral setup, it's kind of nominal. It's just people don't really think about it that much, or if people are listening to music on their headphones or wherever, it's just stereo, and they don't really try to go out of that. What are your thoughts on this sort of this lack of space, or these lack of availability for multi-channel experiences, and what could be done to improve this?
That's a great question. It's an important question, and it's true. There is no way around it, that there is a very real issue of how expensive it is to have a multi-channel system available to you. And not a lot of spaces have the capacity to do that. I think I do see more and more spaces trying to offer the opportunity to do spatial audio stuff. I think there is also something really beautiful in DIY spaces that do that. Like in the early days of the City Swamp things, well, the early days for me, I remember we were always located at Friedman Gallery in New York, but at the beginning we were in the basement, and Daniel had a collection of speakers of his own, but we didn't have a space ready for us. Like it wasn't a plug in and let's go situation. Like we would need to come in hours before, place up all the stands, bring 8 speakers, bring an interface, bring a snake, put it together, take it apart at the end of the night. There was no console, it was just an interface and a laptop. Sometimes if by chance Daniel needed like the console around, then we did have a console, but like it wasn't anything like this. And I think that I loved that for us, and in general it was such a fun time. Like this is how we do this. Like we need to find speakers. Sometimes they're not all the same, and then we need to tune them a little bit. But generally, yeah, like you just put speakers on a stand and you get a cable and there you go. Just get something that has enough outputs. My dream is that I would have like a stock of speakers in the equipment room and that I could just have my students build up their own little configurations and like explore what interests them as opposed to just the one ring we have. But yeah, I remember I was working, well, while I was at Brown, I was a TA for Amber Vistine, another incredible composer, teaches in Emerson today. And in her class, she was teaching an audio specialization class and I was her teaching assistant, and we had a student who wanted to do like something with Bluetooth mics. So we built like an aggregate device so that they can play everything through those wireless speakers. So there are, like, people are getting more and more creative for this. I guess multi-channel just, you just need more than one speaker at the end of the day. So it could be anything from 2 to 8 or 2 to 142, like in Virginia Tech, what they have over there. I don't think, I think specialization doesn't begin when you have front and back. I think there is a lot to be said for a stereo mix that is spatial. And I love Daniel's definition for that. Spatial music is anything in which space is an active and central part of the composition, which also changed, I think, how I think about that and how I think about teaching that. Thinking about space as a central part of the composition would change the way you do this. It would get people to turn their heads, even if it's stereo, I think. But the access to bigger systems, it's bigger than what I can. I cannot solve it. I don't love it, that it's so expensive. But I think the fact that there are so few spaces that do it allowed it to gather around it a very good community of people, in a sense. Like the people in Berlin I just met were so nice and so committed to this idea, and that they built their spaces on their own. Amazing system. But yeah, and we did have a similar conversation in a sense, but about how it's difficult to get access. But the people that operate in those spheres, I tend to like them a lot. Yeah.
It's interesting because most of my listening experience in life, I'm sure maybe it's similar for you. It's just like headphones, or maybe like my computer speakers. So in a way, I think any individual who listens to music, they have to kind of push themselves to experience that unique multi-channel experience. And I wish they did, because it's pretty cool, and there's nothing like it. Yeah. So yeah, I hope more people do it. In a way, this brings us more into like the sound art territory potentially. It's just a very different way of experiencing music than, say, how most people do it. Like if they listen to stuff on the radio, or even most like Aaron Parks fans, they have a certain conception of music. Yeah. But then when you get into this multi-channel territory, all of a sudden this is like a different musical experience. So what was it like for you to maybe transition into that world, and instead of, say, performing clarinet in a jazz setting or in a jazz big band, now you're the composer for this multi-channel exhibition in New York? Like, that must have been a shift. So how was that?
That was complicated, to say the least. Art school has very different traditions than music school. I'm not gonna go too much into that, but sound art and music are two separate spheres. I think in my head, like in the way I understand it and the way I define it, to me, sound art suggests that there is less of time-based form to the work, meaning it is intended to be experienced in a gallery space, not in the concert energy. Like people are not coming in, sitting down, listening from the beginning to the end of the piece and go home.
Right.
People can come in and stick around for 30 seconds. People come in at the end of the piece and catch the beginning. Like their beginning of their listening process is at the end. So the story kind of doesn't need to rely on time that much. And there are a lot of good pieces that do not rely on that. And that operate in those spheres. I felt that mine were just not the correct fit for that. And I tried to make installation work, but I think my music education and I think the way I was brought up, you know, even thinking about jazz again and improv is the free section of the piece, but it's so related to time. And the story has to evolve, and like the harmonic development of the changes of the piece, like it all has like kind of a progression to it that leads you somewhere. Right. And I think for me it was too hard to disconnect from that notion. So I remember that when I finished the program, they asked me kind of what's the biggest thing I'm taking away from it, and it was kind of a joke, but it wasn't really, because I think now looking back, I think it's a big realization. I said I realized I'm not a sound artist out of those 2 years of training, which is true. I felt so ready to go home to music. I was just like, thanks, I'm done. I need those conversations again. I need to think more about that. And funnily, I became a better producer when I was working on sound art, in a sense, because I did pieces, I did compositions. Some of them I still like, some of them I don't want to hear ever again. But I feel like because I had to unlearn a lot of things musically, which I don't think I succeeded in doing very well, like my pieces that do not belong in an installation space. But I did learn how to produce a little bit better. I think because I was more focused on that than on making like the story. Yeah. So sound art versus music versus multi-channel. I mean, there are multi-channel sound art pieces. There are multi-channel music pieces. There. In the series that we're doing, I think we're mainly trying to feature pieces that fall under music more than installation, although we have a series that is open for more longer forms that allows for that kind of work that needs like more time to unravel, and it's a little bit detached from beginning, middle, and end. But to me, that's the biggest separation between the two, and I don't really see myself as a sound artist, like at all. I don't think it's doing any good, not for me and not for the genre.
I think I really appreciate that you brought up that being able to perceive form is probably a very important factor when it comes to, say, sound art and music. Because when I go to those installation settings, maybe I come in with this bias of wanting to know where the beginning was and feeling a little lost, or feeling, I guess it's like a FOMO of sorts, like, oh, I should have arrived 5 minutes earlier, or maybe I'll come back in 30 minutes or something like that. So I never made that realization, so that's really cool. We've had this long conversation about more contemporary music and this kind of work. When you go to Aaron Park's concerts and similar kinds of music, do you listen to it in a different way now? Because you've been engaged in this different artistic practice for a while, but like, do you maybe listen to, say, Aaron Parks's, or if it's like Keith Jarrett or someone, like you hear him moan at the piano and it's like, oh, I hear that as a sound effect now instead of like, I don't know, raw human expression. Do you just perceive those more conventional musical experiences differently?
If anything, working in experimental music made me love popular music even more. I love going to concerts, and I love going to concerts of music that I know all the lyrics to, and I love going to Aaron Parks. And no, I don't listen to. I see him dancing at the piano and like singing the notes, and for me, it's more like, I mean, if I need to attach it to my practice in any way, it's like, oh yeah, I made the right decision that I'm not there. But it's just joy. It just like, it reminds me of why I love music so much. Funnily, I do listen to more music that is not like what I make than music that I make. Like I go to experimental music concerts, and I enjoy it in a certain way, but it's not the same joy that I get out of going to see a jazz show, or that I get going to see my favorite band, or just like my favorite thing is to go to a concert where I can sing everything. Which is not really, I cannot imagine a crowd coming to see my pieces and being like, oh yeah, is it a myth or is it a true story? Like, no, that's not gonna happen.
I think I relate with that very much, because I listen to a lot of Aaron Parks. I'm sure for maybe more than a year, he was like my top artist. But at the same time, I was probably like writing these string quartets, or making these generative max pieces. So it's completely different. But for me, I wonder if it's like my attraction to this experimental music. It's not because I enjoy listening to it. It's because I really enjoy making it, and being in that different kind of zone where I can, try something new, try something different. But if I want to listen to stuff, maybe I'll lean towards, more popular styles, like the music Aaron Parks plays, like the more recent stuff that's inspired by progressive rock and all that. Some of these things are very simple. It's just an ostinato, and he's just soloing over it.
Yeah.
Some of these are like strictly in C major, so it's very cool to be able to enjoy that at the same time. Yeah, do you find yourself into experimental music more so because it's more fun to make as opposed to fun to listen to? Does that make sense?
100%. I mean, my fascination with speech kind of made it so that I am just there. Like, I'm in the experimental side of things always. I do think that, I kind of said that already, but more and more in the recent, like, let's say, my most recent works, like 4 or 5 pieces maybe, and the album that I'm working on now, I'm allowing myself to be more attuned to the stuff I enjoy listening to. I know that it's not gonna make it up there. There is no way I'm gonna like throw some chords into this, like in the traditional sense or something like that, just because it doesn't interest me to work with this material. I am very interested in working with, I mean, other aspects of musical language, and then yes, I do find myself going to, like, what did I listen to the other day that really helped me? Noga Erez, for example, is a contemporary, like, pop. I think pop is the right word. But the production is so cool on it. So cool. And just the way that the correlation between sound effects and beats, something really spoke to me in that. And I brought it in to the way I worked on the stuff I did in Berlin just now. Or Billie Eilish is another character that I thought about, actually. And like, yeah, I'm more interested in making stuff my way. I think that's just my musical language. But then being an engineer, I think also kind of helped me with that, because I learned to work with people on their stuff. And kind of my philosophy about mixing, for example, is that you gotta love the music, no matter what. You love it. Because if you don't love it, you won't help it sound the best it can sound. So, yeah, I mean, from talking to you, I'm realizing how much I don't care about genre. And how I think, like, loving the music is the most important thing. And being kind of at peace with what you make, and where you come from and what you bring into your work, I think, I mean, it's all there, even if it's not in the most obvious of ways. I love listening to playlists that artists put together to just show you kind of what they were thinking about or listening to as they were working on this album, and you always find the most surprising shit on there. Like, how is that even related to anything you just did? I have no idea, but I understand it because we need it. We need this exposure. We need this tiny moments of inspiration that might surprise you in like the way you go about things. When I say Billie Eilish, I don't write songs and there are no rhymes or anything like that, but like there was like one of those, I think maybe it's from When We Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? There was a vocal production moment where they opened the backing vocals hard left, hard right, and the lead was like front center singing and the back was speech, like the backing vocals, and I was like, oh, that's such a cool idea. Like this layering and this pitching and this threading of it, like, okay. And that kind of found its way into my work, but I don't know that you would know that it came from Billie Eilish if you heard it, or that it would take on the same form that she did. Right. So yes, I think, like for me, the stuff I am interested in saying as an artist are related to speech, and are related, they would not fit in a song form. I'm also not interested in writing songs. Doesn't mean that I don't love songs.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. Well, we can move on to the fun activity now. So you actually mentioned all of these pieces, and I think they were all done at Columbia.
Probably. From the picture, what I saw that you pulled up there.
So I think it was Dyslexia, Women, and sinbeLa.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I'm just curious about how you came up with it. I was just curious about your installation work. So fun activity. Okay. So here's the first one. Would you like to share what's happening?
We are missing 2 speakers. No, you're fine. But there is another one at the top and another one at the bottom. I probably super clipped your microphone right now.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay. But okay, what can I tell you about this one? I'm dyslexic, and well, Columbia. This is the first piece I made at Columbia, and it was a shock for me being there, and the amount of material that you had to study suddenly, and the reading and all of that, and it reminded me of my dyslexia. Like it made it very apparent again that I'm slow. And then we had to do a piece in a library. So I decided to just do a dyslexia piece and kind of make it so that I was already thinking of this portraiture idea and looking at sound in a sense. So I decided to just put those bookshelf speakers on a bookshelf. There's like a long cable at the back that goes to another room, and like that's where the computer is and the interface and everything you need. But I wanted to create the sensation of what happens when I am confronted with so many books, like all the stuff that this brings up for me. Right. And yeah, it's based on my diagnoses. So there is like a recitation of my diagnosis, and some like AI voices of reading definitions of dyslexia. Before it was like scaringly good. So the voices kind of terrifying. But yeah, that's that one.
Cool. And this one really intrigued me because just the visual setup of it, it's pleasing in its own way, but also it's very like as a composer, I'm very much drawn towards trying to think of how many different pairs I could come up with, and how, like, if this was, let's say, a bunch of LEDs, you could definitely think of some kind of a pattern, or like ways to create interesting geometrical patterns. But with sound, it's also it was just very intriguing to me, and it kind of inspired me to think about spatializing in these kinds of settings. So yeah, could you tell us a little bit about this?
Of course. So they do look very similar, but this is actually Peter Pan. Woman was only 10 channels.
Oh, my bad.
No, it's okay. I mean, Woman is kind of the baby sister for that one. Like, Woman was the first and this was the second. But I worked on them in a very similar way. So I can talk about both of them, I guess, in this sense. So in Woman, what I was interested in is frequency and distribution, and what does it mean? Like how can I draw with the frequency spectrum? So how, like, where do I place? I mean, obviously high frequencies at the top and low frequencies at the bottom of the portrait. But then I had all of this space sideways, and I wanted to kind of play with what I expose and what I keep hidden as the piece goes on. So it does a lot of that, and also the delays worked the same way. That's what I mean when I say I became a better producer at Columbia, because I had so much more time to think about all of these things. So I built a lot of delay patterns that moved in specific ways, and also had like filter automations on them to play with this frequency content idea that was very present throughout the work. And then with Peter Pan, I took this idea and expanded it. So I recorded 4 women for this piece, and each cluster of 4 speakers has one voice on it. So this piece was working with micro and macro specialization. So each person in the piece had her own mini quad system to move around. But then when ideas were shared across the room, I was working with a lot of onomatopoeic devices and bigger gestures of movement across the painting to emphasize that. So like if everyone is in agreement, we go up and down, or if everyone is in disagreement, I create chaos. Yeah, and I wanted to really play with this idea more. But yeah, it was tricky with the micro stuff, because I also didn't have access to this room where this picture was taken till the very last minute. So I mixed it in a very different space. Yeah, I don't know if it was a successful one or not. It looked gorgeous, at least that. And I love the stereo mix of this piece, both of them, I guess. I also performed Woman live once at Roulette, not in a vertical system, but in a spread.
Oh, I see.
So that was interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, we have one more.
Let's go. Those are the speakers that Daniel and I used at the early days of the City Swam thing. This is in Friedman Gallery. Yeah, so I was very obsessed with vertical distribution of sound, as you can understand. And what's going on there, and like how can we work with specialization when we are right in front of something. So all of those pieces speak to that. In this one, this was a sound design exercise that ended up being a piece. Actually, it only happened to me twice that this happened, that I started something as an exercise and it finished, and I ended up deciding this is the final product. So yeah, and speaking of ostinato, I was kind of thinking about that. It had a rhythmic pattern to it, boom, bam, boom, very basic, but it was very much in the back of the piece. But yeah, I was trying to see how can I play with front and back in this system. I also knew I was going to use those speakers, and I was really excited about them because they have a really cool low end. Very healthy, but it doesn't like eat the whole room. So I was playing with front and back while you're only in front of it. So how do you play with distance? That was kind of mainly what I was thinking through with this one, in a rhythmic way. And what is it like? Why the two elevated one? How do they help with that? And they actually did. Because it gave you a different balance. Like if I wanted to make something closer, obviously playing it from 3 speakers at the bottom feels a little bit closer than the 2 that are a little bit taller than them. Yeah.
you've mentioned these different ways of distributing sound. So you can do it vertically, you can do it surround, but anything that goes beyond stereo, like as long as you have the freedom to configure your own setup in a non-standard way, so like not 5.1, 7.1, so on and so forth, you can basically do your own thing.
Yeah.
Like you could have a stereo setup. Like I had a piece once where we had the piano in front of the stage because that's where it would be, right? And then I had a shakuhachi player, so like a Japanese flute of sorts, woodwind instrument. And I had him walk around the audience, and I had like a Bluetooth speaker which would go from different places, and then I had like a phone which could go anywhere else, you know. So like you can come up with your own spatial schemes in these settings. What is your process like when you explore these kinds of concepts? Like, do you really think of compositional ideas from the very beginning and try to accommodate them into these spaces, or is it like do you just think of a format first and commit to it, and then
No, I begin with a concept always. It's always a question that I want to think through. And then, okay, let me put it this way. There are two types of pieces I do. The interview-based ones and the text-based ones. With the interview ones, I can come into a piece with an idea and a question that I want to think about. And then the interviews, I'm committed to working with that source material, and I don't go and record extras if I didn't get what I wanted. But the source eventually chooses the direction for me in the end. Like I can come with an idea, but whatever the people bring to the conversation actually becomes the driving force of the work. And then when I do a text-based piece, like I don't know if you know that one, it's called Through the Holes. Yeah, it's a piece I did with Hanan Ben Simon. He's a vocalist. And we had this text that we were working with. And then the text takes the lead. And it's framing the text in the right way. And thinking about what would support this lead. And then comes the compositional thinking. And then my priority is always to stay loyal to the voices, especially if I'm doing a piece that is interview based and people donated their time and their words to this. I want to make sure that it's respectful to what they said, and like that I don't change. Like I would never, if someone says I love bananas and I hate apples, I wouldn't but it really needs to be the other way for my idea to work. Like I wouldn't shift. Like I wouldn't move the hate and love around so that it says I love bananas but I hate apples. So I always stay loyal to the source, and then, so I think it's always that. It's always the source at the end of the day. That's the driving force. And the musical ideas, I kind of go with them. If it goes into a direction that I like at the beginning, I don't know what I'm doing. Most of the time when I'm trying to start to set something up, I usually don't know what's going to happen, because I like beginning with things a little bit on the barer side and building up and like see, okay, and my process is very additive, so I need this, I need that, or you know what, I don't need this anymore, and then I delete. I love deleting things. But it's based on that, and whatever that source is, the text, the word, the sentence, the voice, the question, and how to support that's the driving force that decides what I need at the end of the day. Like I don't think I've ever began a composition from the background sounds, which could be an interesting exercise for me. Like what does it mean to start with the background and find something to sit on top of it? But no, for me it's always the idea, and then the rest supports the idea.
Cool. Well, Lee, thanks for donating your time to me. Appreciated the conversation. Where can people find you on the internet?
On the internet, I have a very moderately active Instagram account. Like it's not super active at all. And I have my website, leegilboa.org. And my music is on Contour Editions, which is a platform run by Richard Garrett, nonprofit and for free. And you can download the multi-channel stems from there too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Cool. This one well. Yeah, 1 hour 15 minutes.
Oh, wow.